Good morning, boys and girls. I'm Miss Lydia from the Boston Library. Thank you for joining me for story time. Today we are talking about maple syrup and pancakes. So it's the perfect time of year to be thinking about that. Our first book is called Maple Syrup Season by Anne Permel, illustrated by Jill Weber. Uncle John leads the horse. It pulls the sled that carries Hannah and Hayden through the deep snow. They are breaking out a trail from the farmhouse to Grandpa's sugar bush. Sap is running in the old sugar maple trees. Do you see any other animals in that picture? It is the time the Brockwell family comes together to make maple syrup. Grandpa drills a hole and hammers in the spout. He hangs a bucket. Soon the first plunk of sap hits the metal bottom. "Sap's rising," Grandpa shouts, and the family cheers and claps mittened hands. Grandpa, the uncles, and Dad drill holes. Two bigger cousins follow and clean out the holes with twigs. Grandma, Aunt Hattie, and Mom hammer in the spouts. Hannah and Hayden hang buckets while the three younger cousins put hats on them. Do you see the hats on the buckets? The sun fades as the last bucket and hats are hung. If there is a warm sunshine, the buckets will fill with sap in a day or two. If the wind blows freezing air and the sky is thick with clouds, it will take longer. "I'll keep an eye on the buckets," Grandpa says. "Grandma will telephone when it's time to take the sap to the sugar house." 3 days later, the buckets brim with clear sap, and the family is back in Grandpa's sugar bush. Mom and Aunt Hattie prepare the sugar house. Do you see the sugar house there? Dad helps the uncles pour the sap from the tree buckets into gathering buckets and then into a giant barrel on the sled. Uncle John leads the horse to the sugar house. It takes all of the grown-ups together to tip the barrel. A stream of sap flows down the gutter to the storage tank. From the storage tank, the sap now pours into the evaporating pans. Flames shoot from the firebox and lick the bottoms of the pan. The sap bubbles and pops as it boils. Boiling sap must be watched very carefully. Not enough heat, and it will not turn to syrup. Too much heat, and the sap burns or even explodes. Uncle Fred's job is to feed the fire. Grandpa tests the temperature. Dad and Uncle John take turns skimming the sap to remove dirt and bark. A maple fog fills the sugar house and rolls out the windows and door. Hannah and Hayden's cheeks are mapley wet. The temperature in the finishing pan creeps to 218 degrees Fahrenheit. Grandpa whoops, "It's sheeting!" The children cheer, "Hooray!" The sap is now syrup. Uncle John opens the spigot and a golden stream cascades into a bucket. He closes the spigot and Grandpa sees if the hydrometer floats. If it does, the syrup is poured through a flannel-lined funnel into a filtering tank. Grandpa pours syrup into the small sample jars to grate it. This first batch of syrup is a pale gold, or fancy grade. The syrup that comes next is darker. It's called grade A. The last syrup of the season will be the darkest and the sweetest. It's called grade B. Tonight, a maple moon will rise when Grandma tucks in Hannah and Hayden alongside the cousins. Meanwhile, the grown-ups work in the sugar house, making syrup until sunrise. The sun tops the trees and the snowflake wisps float on air. After breakfast, Hannah and Hayden smooth down a mound of freshly fallen snow with brand new rakes. Grandma dribbles warm syrup, which quickly turns from sparkling rivers and ponds into sweet, chewy taffy. Grandma calls only once, "Sugar on snow!" The family comes running. They drop to their knees and pick up the taffy. Grandma has forks for Mom and Aunt Hattie, who like to twirl the candy before eating it. Even Grandpa and Grandma kneel beside Hannah and Hayden. The whole Brockwell family grins and laughs. They know that the sugary treat means that spring will be coming soon. Our next book is called Sugar Snow. Our next book is called Sugar Snow. Adapted from the Little House books by Laura Ingalls Wilder, illustrated by Doris Ettlinger. Once upon a time, a little girl named Laura lived in the big woods of Wisconsin, in a little house made of logs. Laura lived in the little house with her pa, her ma, her big sister Mary, her baby sister Carrie, and their good old bulldog Jack. Spring was coming to the big woods. For days the sun shone and the weather was warm. All day the icicles fell one by one from the little house into the snowbanks. Then one day Laura saw a patch of ground showing through the snow. "May I go out and play, Ma?" she asked. "You may tomorrow," Ma promised. That night Laura woke up shivering. Her nose was icy cold. Ma tucked another quilt around her. "Snuggle close to Mary," Ma said, "and you'll get warm." In the morning, Laura looked out the window, and the ground was covered with soft, thick snow. Pa came in, stamping the soft snow from his boots. "It's a sugar snow," he said. Laura quickly tasted a snowflake from Pa's sleeve, but it didn't taste like sugar at all. "Why is it a sugar snow, Pa?" she asked. Pa said he would explain tonight after he came home from Grandpa's. It was late when Pa came home that night. He came in with a big bucket and 2 little packages. He gave the bucket to Ma and the little packages to Laura and Mary. The bucket was full of dark brown maple syrup. When Laura opened her little package, she found a little hard brown cake with beautifully crinkled edges. Laura bit off one of the little crinkles, and it was sweet. "It's maple sugar," said Pa. Supper was ready, and Laura and Mary laid their little maple sugar cakes by their plates while they ate the maple syrup on their bread. After supper, Pa took them on his knees as he sat by the fire and told them about his day at Grandpa's and the sugar snow. "All winter," Pa said, "Grandpa has been making wooden buckets for the maple syrup. When the first warm weather came, he took the buckets out into the wood and put each one by a maple tree. Then he drilled a small hole in the tree so that the sap could run out. After all the buckets were full, he boiled all the sap in a big iron kettle until it turned into maple syrup. Then he cooled some of that sweet syrup into cakes of hard brown maple sugar." "Is that why it's called sugar snow? Because Grandpa made sugar?" asked Laura. "No," said Pa. "It's called sugar snow because a snow at this time of year helps the trees to make more sap for the syrup." Then it was time for bed. By the time Laura and Mary had washed their sticky fingers and were snug in their beds, Pa and his fiddle were both singing them off to sleep. Now that we've learned all about maple syrup, what would you put your maple syrup on? My bet is a pancake. So we're going to read this next book called If You Give a Pig a Pancake by Laura Numeroff, illustrated by Felicia Bond. If you give a pig a pancake, she'll want some syrup to go with it. You'll give her some of your favorite maple syrup. She'll probably get all sticky, so she'll want to take a bath. She'll ask you for some bubbles. When you give her the bubbles, she'll probably ask you for a toy, and you'll have to find your rubber duck. The duck will remind her of the farm where she was born, and she might feel homesick and want to visit her family. She'll want you to come too. She'll look through your closet for a suitcase. Then she'll look under your bed. And when she's under your bed, she'll find your old tap shoes. She'll try them on. She'll probably need something special to wear with them. When she's all dressed, she'll ask for some music. You'll play your very best piano piece, and she'll start dancing. Then she'll want you to take her picture, so you'll have to get your camera. When she sees the picture, look at that picture, she'll ask you to take more, and then she'll want to send one to each of her friends. You'll have to give her some envelopes and stamps and take her to the mailbox. Look at all those pieces of mail she has to send out. On the way, she'll see the tree in your backyard, and she'll want to build a tree house. So you'll have to get her some wood and a hammer and some nails. When the tree house is finished, wow, look at that tree house. Now she'll want to decorate it. She'll ask for wallpaper and glue. When she hangs the wallpaper, she'll get all sticky. Feeling sticky will remind her of your favorite maple syrup. She'll probably ask you for some. And chances are, if she asks you for some syrup, she'll want a pancake to go with it.
The sap flows out of the maple trees on a warm, sunny day. It is transported downhill by lines to a holding tank. It takes 40 gallons of sap for 1 gallon of syrup. Sap is transported from the woods to the sugar house, where it is boiled down into maple syrup. An evaporator is used to remove the water from the sap, leaving behind the sweet syrup. It is then bottled and sold for people to take home and enjoy.
I hope you enjoyed our stories today. Spring is officially here. The maple syrup has been made, and it is the perfect time to enjoy it with some pancakes. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next week.